The moment he saw them, his breath caught, not because they were cold or alone, but because something about them felt painfully familiar. The traffic light glowed red, rain streaked across the windshield, and the city blurred into reflections, yet his eyes refused to move away from the two little girls huddled near the sidewalk. One was tying a torn shoelace with shaking fingers. The other watched the crowd with eyes far too old for her small face. He told himself to look away. He told himself it was none of his business. But his hands were already gripping the steering wheel too tightly, his heart beating like it used to on the day his twins were born. Just days ago, he had signed away a marriage he thought was unbreakable. The headlines still called him a billionaire, a visionary, a man who had everything. Yet as he sat there in his luxury car, staring at two children who looked like they belonged anywhere but the street, he felt emptier than ever. The light turned green. Cars honked behind him. Still he didn't move. One of the girls lifted her head. Their eyes met. In that instant the world tilted. The shape of her face, the small scar near her eyebrow, the way she tilted her head, it struck him like a memory punching through time. His chest tightened. No, that was impossible. His daughters were safe. They were supposed to be protected. They were supposed to be with their mother, living the secure life he had paid dearly to ensure. Before logic could stop him, he stepped out into the rain. The girls stiffened, instinctively moving closer together. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to their level, ignoring the cold soaking through his suit. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. The older one studied him carefully, as if deciding whether truth was worth the risk. "We're fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "We're just waiting." Waiting for what, he wondered. Or for who? As thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a terrifying thought formed in his mind, one that made his stomach drop. If these girls were who he feared they were, then everything he believed about his past, his choices, and his divorce was about to collapse. And the truth, whatever it was, would change all of their lives forever. The girls didn't answer his question right away. Instead, they exchanged a quick glance, the kind only siblings share, silent and full of meaning. He noticed then how closely they mirrored each other, the same eyes, the same nervous habit of rubbing their sleeves between their fingers. His pulse quickened, and a chill ran deeper than the rain soaking his shoes. "Waiting for our mom," the quieter one finally said. Her voice was soft but steady, as if she had practiced sounding brave. "She said she'd come back." The words hit him harder than any headline ever had. He had heard that promise before, spoken casually, confidently, as if it could never break. He swallowed and glanced around. The street was busy, people rushing past, pretending not to notice two children sitting on the pavement. Time seemed to stretch, thick and heavy. "How long have you been here?" he asked. The older girl shrugged. "Since yesterday. Maybe before dark." She said it the way someone says the weather, as if long hours of waiting had already taught her not to expect much. Something inside him fractured. Yesterday. His mind raced backward, replaying phone calls that went unanswered, messages left unread, a silence he had mistaken for peace. He had assumed his former wife needed space. He had assumed money could fix distance. He had assumed wrong. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, opening a photo he hadn't looked at in days. Two smiling girls in matching pajamas sitting on his bed, holding a birthday cake between them. He held the screen low, careful not to scare them. "Do these girls look like you?" he asked quietly. The older one leaned forward, eyes widening. The younger gasped softly and covered her mouth. "That's us," she whispered. "Daddy took that picture." The word hit him like a wave. Daddy. The street noise faded. The rain no longer mattered. In that moment, titles meant nothing. Wealth meant nothing. All that existed were two children he had failed to protect and a truth too heavy to ignore. He stood slowly and held out his hand. "You don't have to wait anymore," he said, voice unsteady. "I'm here now." Behind his calm words, a storm was rising, one that would force him to face the choices he had made and uncover what had truly happened after the divorce. They hesitated, as if trusting him might cost them the last bit of safety they had left. He understood that look. It was the same look he used to see in boardrooms when people sensed power but feared the price of believing in it. Slowly, carefully, he took off his coat and wrapped it around their shoulders, shielding them from the cold and the stares of strangers. Inside the car, the heater hummed softly. The girls sat close together in the back seat, hands still linked, eyes moving from the glowing dashboard to his reflection in the mirror. He drove without speaking for a few minutes, giving them space, letting reality settle in. His thoughts raced. How could things have fallen apart so quickly? How could two children slip through every safety net he thought he had built? "Are we in trouble?" the younger one finally asked, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping the windows. He shook his head immediately. No, you're safe. I promise. The word promise tasted different now, heavier, more sacred. They told him fragments of their story as the city lights passed by. The big house had disappeared. The phone stopped working. Their mother cried often, then slept for long hours. One morning she told them to wait while she went to get help. She never came back. They waited until the sun went down. Then they waited some more. Every sentence felt like a quiet accusation. Not against her, but against him. He had trusted distance. He had trusted systems. He had trusted that providing money was the same as providing care. Sitting behind the wheel, listening to his daughters describe nights spent counting passing cars, he understood how wrong he had been. He pulled into a small cafe parking lot and turned off the engine. He wanted answers, but first they needed warmth, food, and certainty. He bought them hot soup and bread, watching their hands shake as they ate. Hunger, he realized, was not just about food. It was about reassurance, about knowing someone would come back. As they finished, the older one looked up at him, eyes sharp and searching. Are you going to leave too? The question cut deep. He leaned closer, meeting her gaze. No, he said firmly. Not again. Whatever happened before, I'm here now. Yet even as he said it, he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the shadows of his past decisions, a truth waited. One that would explain how love had turned into loss, and how rebuilding would demand more courage than any business risk he had ever taken. The night stretched on longer than he expected. He took them to a quiet apartment he kept for late workdays, a place that had always felt temporary until now. Fresh towels, clean clothes, a warm bath, simple things suddenly felt like miracles. As the girls slept curled together on the couch, he sat at the table, staring at his phone, replaying every ignored message and every assumption he had made since the divorce. At dawn he began making calls. Not to lawyers first, but to people who knew the truth beyond paperwork. School records confirmed the withdrawals. Caretakers spoke in careful tones, hinting at missed payments and sudden disappearances. Piece by piece, the picture formed, and it was nothing like the story he had been told. What he had believed was stability had quietly crumbled while he focused on meetings and deals. When the girls woke, they found him already dressed, eyes tired but determined. We're going to fix this, he told them, pouring juice into small glasses. Together. They visited a community center that morning. The counselor listened carefully, her expression shifting from polite concern to shock as the details unfolded. She explained how easily children could slip through cracks when adults stopped communicating. Hearing it aloud made his chest tighten. This wasn't just a personal failure, it was a warning. By afternoon, his phone buzzed with a message he had dreaded and expected at the same time. His former wife had been located. Not where he imagined, not surrounded by the comfort he had paid for, but in a place shaped by poor choices and overwhelming pressure. The truth wasn't dramatic, it was quietly devastating. Pride, isolation, and fear had pushed her further away from help than anyone realized. He didn't feel anger, only a deep, aching sadness. He saw now that walking away had not made either of them free. It had simply left the children unprotected. That evening, as the girls sat beside him watching the city lights, he understood something fundamental had shifted. His success had been built on control and certainty. This moment demanded something else entirely: patience, humility, and responsibility. And as he looked at his daughters, he knew the hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. It was deciding what kind of man he would become because of it. The next days moved fast, yet every hour felt heavy. News spread quietly through the right channels, and people who once spoke to him with polished confidence now lowered their voices. Not because of his wealth, but because of the situation he had never imagined facing. He requested privacy not for himself, but for the two small lives suddenly depending on him in ways money could never replace. He arranged temporary schooling, choosing a modest place where the girls could feel normal again. On the first morning, they held his hands tightly before walking through the doors. He watched until they disappeared inside, realizing this simple moment mattered more than any contract he had ever signed. When they waved from the window, smiling for the first time in days, something inside him loosened. In quiet moments, guilt crept in. He remembered birthdays missed, calls shortened, and promises postponed. Success had taught him to measure time in outcomes, not in presence. Now every minute felt precious. He learned their routines, their fears, the songs they hummed when nervous. At night, he sat beside them, listening to stories they made up, stories where families always found their way back. The truth about their mother became clearer with each conversation. She hadn't been cruel, She had been overwhelmed, isolated by expectations she didn't know how to escape. He understood then that blame would solve nothing. Compassion, however, might. One evening, the older girl looked at him thoughtfully. "Are we staying with you for real?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He knelt so they were eye to eye. "Yes," he said. "Not because I have to, but because I want to." That night, as they slept peacefully, he stood by the window, watching the city he once ruled from a distance. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about growth or expansion. He was thinking about balance, about rebuilding trust brick by brick. The street where he had found them no longer felt like a place of shame. It felt like the moment his real life began. The change didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly in small decisions made every day. He adjusted his schedule, turned down meetings, learned to cook simple breakfasts that sometimes burned and made the girls laugh. Their laughter became his new measure of success. Each smile felt like proof that healing was possible. Weeks later, he finally met their mother again. The moment was heavy, not with anger, but with unspoken regret. She looked smaller than he remembered, her confidence replaced by exhaustion. There were no accusations, no dramatic words. Only honesty. She admitted her mistakes. He admitted his distance. Between them stood the truth neither had wanted to face alone, that love without support can still fall apart. They agreed on one thing without hesitation: the children came first. Not pride. Not fear. Not the past. As months passed, the girls began to thrive. Their eyes grew brighter. Their shoulders relaxed. They stopped asking if he would leave. Instead, they asked what tomorrow would bring. And every time, he answered with certainty. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a park, the younger one looked up at him and said, "We're not lost anymore." He felt his throat tighten. "No," he replied softly. "You were never lost. We just had to find each other again." Standing there, surrounded by ordinary people living ordinary lives, he understood the greatest lesson his journey had taught him. Wealth could build towers, but presence built trust. Control could close deals, but humility healed hearts. Losing his family had shown him what truly mattered, and finding them again had given him purpose beyond anything he had ever achieved. The story didn't end with perfection. It ended with progress. With hope. With a promise kept not by words but by action. And in that quiet victory he found something far greater than success. He found home. The moment that truly changed everything came when he returned to the same street where it had all begun. He hadn't planned to stop, but his feet slowed on their own. The bus shelter was still there. The pavement looked ordinary. Yet to him it was sacred ground, the place where illusion ended and truth began. He stood quietly, remembering the fear in their eyes, the weight of his own disbelief, and the silence that had nearly cost him his family. Life looked different now. His home was no longer defined by size or design but by warmth. Mornings were filled with hurried shoes and unfinished breakfasts. Evenings echoed with homework questions, shared stories, and soft laughter. The world still knew him as a powerful man, but his daughters knew him as something far more important. Someone who stayed. One night, as rain tapped gently against the window, the girls sat beside him, drawing pictures. The older one handed him a page showing 3 figures holding hands under a bright sky. "This is us," she said simply. He stared at the drawing, his vision blurring. In that simple image was everything he had almost lost and everything he had chosen to rebuild. He realized then that second chances don't arrive with noise or applause. They arrive quietly, disguised as responsibility. He had once believed winning meant never falling. Now he knew better. True strength was standing back up, admitting failure and choosing differently. The past would always exist, but it no longer controlled the future. As he turned off the lights and tucked the girls into bed, the younger one whispered, "Thank you for finding us." He smiled gently. "Thank you for waiting." The city outside continued to rush forward, unaware of the small miracle happening inside that room. A broken story had become a hopeful one. Not because of wealth, but because someone finally understood what mattered most. And in choosing love over distance, presence over pride, he proved that even after loss, life can still begin again, stronger, wiser, and full of meaning.